Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at E Green Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host. I'm super excited to be in community with you today. Jessica Surdyka, so excited for you to join us on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Share a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh. I am 27 years old. I am a manager at an eye doctor's office, but I don't consider myself, or I don't describe myself as that. I think that I will describe myself as a kind, compassionate, caring, independent, strong woman.
I love that. I love it because you separate out like what I do is not who I am.
Yes.
Right. And so speaking of that, like how did you get to the place where that's the way you describe yourself?
I think I struggled with like my self-identity for a really long time. I think people tell you at a very young age, like you need to figure out what you want to do with your life and figure out where you want to go. And even like when I was in high school and like sitting with my guidance counselors, I had no idea what I really wanted to do. And I think that like was it was hand in hand with like I didn't know who I was as a person. And so for a really long time, like I would just like all of my friends, if they had things that they liked, I would also adapt those things. And at a certain point, it's like, that's not what makes you happy anymore. So then I really had to like look within to like find out what I enjoyed, what I really liked. And like, that was like, I was happy, like finding out like all of those little things about myself. So yeah.
I love that. You know, it's so interesting. Part of the reason I asked you to be on the podcast is because I was like, much of our conversation is focused around how do we go reclaim these pieces of us that we've kind of lost, right? Because I'm significantly older than you. And so knowing you, I know, right? It's so shocking, but knowing you and seeing how you kind of traverse through life and do all these awesome things and kind of lean into the best versions of you early, to me was something I think this episode, we can focus for the younger folks out there, because you said two things that are really important. As you're growing up, people tell you have to know these things, which I know as an older person, you never really know, right? You're always learning and growing.
Yeah.
And then two, you started to think about like, instead of me holding all these identities that other people have, I'm going to decide and be curious about who I'm becoming. So that being said, how do you think about what next looks like? Like when you're making decisions to honor what and whom you're becoming, what's that thought process like for you when you're starting to kind of forge forward to something new?
I think a big thing is like just what makes me happy. Like I don't want to put my energy in anything that doesn't make me feel just as good as the energy that I'm putting out. So if it takes a lot out of me or it's like very strenuous and like too tiring, like it's not that like that's a whole thing. But I think I really focus on what makes me happy. And if like going to the gym every day makes me happy, like that's what I'm going to put my energy into. And I'm not going to put my energy into like negative things that like bring me down. Like I really genuinely focus on trying to curate like the happiest, healthiest lifestyle that I can live.
I love that. So in doing that, right, what I've noticed, I've said to someone multiple times this weekend randomly was like, once I found peace, I fist fight somebody for it. Like I'm protecting it. Like I'm not giving it up. Right.
Yeah.
And that requires us to really be mindful of what spaces we're in. Right. So like, talk to me about how now when you're saying like, what makes me happy? I don't want to be in things that make me tired. Like, what does your body tell you when you, because at first when it's happening and you're in that space, potentially you're like, oh, I just don't feel, I'm not sure. Right. So like, how do you listen to your body? What's the practices that you lean into daily, weekly, monthly that kind of allows you to check in with like what's happening for you?
I mean, I physically like do check-ins with myself. Like if I don't feel like at a state of like, I guess security would be the word, like in myself, like I kind of like look at all the things around me. Like my mom would tell me when I was younger, like if I had like these big blowout temper tantrums, she'd be like, did you eat your protein today? Like, did you eat all of these things? Like, she would make sure that like I wasn't just like indulging in sweets. And if I was indulging in sweets, she's like, oh, yep, that's why you're having a temper tantrum today. So let's get you some protein. So I think she instilled from like a very young age that I just needed to like constantly check in with myself. So if I'm feeling like really exhausted one day and I can't get X, Y, and Z done, I'm like, okay, did I drink my water? Did I have enough sleep last night? Did I eat everything that I said that I was going to eat? Did I like give myself a nap if I needed it during the day? Did I give myself some me time? Like I am constantly throughout every motion of the day checking in with myself to make sure that I'm at a state that I can maintain all day. Because if I'm not good, like I'm a manager at an eye doctor's office. So if I'm not good, my team's not good. And then if my team's not good, the patients aren't good. So my energy flows into other people. And I don't want to be the reason that their day is not happy. Like I don't want to be that type of person.
I love that. You know, what I hear you saying is, did I give myself? Which to me translates to permission and grace.
Mm-hmm.
How did you learn to give yourself permission and grace? Because a lot of people who come on this podcast and we chat and we talk, and that becomes one of the hardest things for us to do. So,
Yep.
so at what point in your life did you decide to lean in and say, you know what, I can grant myself permission and grace to do these things to care for myself?
It took me a really long time to do that. I was in a relationship for 9 years, and at some point, I realized that I was just pouring way too much into this person and not pouring enough into myself. And I realized that, like, one, I was so young when I got into the relationship. I was 16 years old. I kind of just like devoted my entire life to this person. And at that time, I had no idea who I was. So when I decided that I didn't want to pour into somebody else and I wanted to start pouring into myself, I had to realize, one, I was going to be the victim in somebody else's story,
Mm,
or I was going to be the villain in somebody else's
mm,
story and they were going to be the victim. And I needed to give myself grace because for 9 years I was giving somebody all of that love and I wasn't giving myself that. And although I could say like I wasted so much time or like it was the worst 9 years of my life, like it really wasn't. I mean, I learned so much, and really like the only way that I was ever going to move forward from that is if every day I gave myself grace and compassion, and I treated myself like I was my best friend. Because if my best friend came to me and she was like, I'm leaving my 9-year relationship, I'm going to give her so much grace, so much empathy, so much compassion. I'm going to care for her and love her, like, because she's going to need all of that. So I wasn't leaving my 9-year relationship because I wanted somebody else to come save me. I wanted to save myself. So I needed to give all of that love and attention to myself instead of allowing somebody else to give it to me, because I was only going to lean on them then for the rest of my life. Like I needed to lean on myself.
mm. Man, I should have had you. That's your camera right there, man. You're gonna have to talk. You better talk to somebody who's listening. They need it. Like, I was like, ooh, this is great, right? And I think it's great because it's true.
Yeah.
And I think so often people forget, because what I'm hearing from you is like, I realized that I had to actually decide to make a different choice for myself,
Mhm.
right? So how hard was that? Like when you decide to and not the point of leaving, but how hard is it for you to decide to love on you? Like, what does that feel like when was it selfish? Did you feel like, oh, I'm overdue? Like, what was that self-talk like when you're trying to now redirect the energy you had put towards something to yourself?
It was a battle because I was constantly told that, like, in relationships, it's supposed to be like a give and a take. And I felt like if I was taking from the love that I was giving him, that it wasn't going to be like that give and take anymore. But then I realized that if that's how I thought in the relationship, then clearly I wasn't getting anything. If I felt like I was the person constantly pouring into the relationship, and if I took a little bit of that for myself, it was going to crumble, then why was that going to be the relationship that I wanted to be in for the rest of my life? Because then I was going to constantly be pouring into it always. So I mean, I talk to my friends about this all the time. Like it was like really like a 2-year process of me like learning how to love myself and learning how to like give myself the things that I wanted out of life. And it took me like I will say like probably 2 years of like learning how to, I mean, that's it, like just love myself. And then at a certain point, it was like, can I still do little things for myself and pour into the relationship? Or if me doing these little things for myself, is that going to make me want to live a separate life from this person? And I think when I had wrote myself a whole letter about that. And I think at the end of the letter, I realized that probably doing those things once a week or once a day for myself was going to pull me out of that relationship, then maybe that relationship wasn't something that I should be in. And I mean, I called my mom hours on the phone probably depressed and crying. It was the hardest thing that I ever had to do. But I realized what I needed to do, and it was for myself, and it was going to make me happy. And at at some point in your life, you have to put yourself first, and you do have to take that selfish step because, I mean, who wants to be miserable and sad for the rest of their life and living their life for somebody else? Like, we are the only people, like, I'm the only person that's going to live with myself for the end of time.
Mhm.
Like, it's just me and that's it. Yes, I can have a boyfriend. Yes, I can have a husband. Yes, I can have children, but it's me from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. So why don't I want the voices in my head to be something that's positive and that makes me happy every day? I don't want to wake up and be like, oh, let me go make coffee for this person, or let me go make coffee for me. Like you don't want it to be a task. You want to be happy and you want to wake up and like, you just don't want to have these like clouded judgment thoughts in your head.
You know, I love that because what it requires, I feel like, us to realize is that, yes, relationships are sacred and important, even friendships, right? Friendships, intimate relationships, otherwise, family relationships. What did you learn about when you redefined what give and take needs to look like for you in relationship, right? Not
Mhm.
necessarily, because I think, yes, you learn very discrete things about that relationship, but I feel like we all have an opportunity that when we learn them, to then extract what we learn and then implement it in other ways, right? So,
Mhm.
did that help you at all redefine what relationship could look like, community could look like from now the perspective that a well you is a better person for other people?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it made me think of one, like when I'm ready to have kids and bring them into the world, it made me realize how I wanted to raise them. It made me realize that like relationships aren't supposed to be like a draining system. Like, and not every day or even at all really is it always going to be 50-50 in a relationship. Sometimes a partner is going to need to give you 45 that day and you're going to have to pull in and give the extra 5, or they're not even going to be able to give you 30 and you're going to have to pull in. But if it's a constant, one person is always down and not giving that 50, then like you'll have to like fix that. But relationships are supposed to be like an extension of your life. They're supposed to bring you happiness and peace and joy, and they're supposed to like help you like change yourself and like want to be a better person. And if there's constant like if there's just like a constant underlying tone of like one person's not doing this or one person's like pulling this out of me, then like what's the point of the friendship and the relationship? Like you have to like I have to add value to your life, you have to add value to my life, and if you don't, then what's the point?
I love that. It also sounds like, though, from this experience, one thing you probably struggled with, I would say everybody in the world struggles with, is boundaries, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
hard, especially when you're young, you don't actually know what boundaries
Oh
are
no.
or what they mean. Um, since you have spent a lot of time kind of thinking about like what brings you a sense of joy, peace, happiness, what does it need to look like? Has it redefined your ability to share what you need out loud for folks? And if it has, can you tell the young folks watching? Because I think truly there are a lot of young people who want to be able to set boundaries in multiple ways, and they
Mhm.
really struggle because what we also unfortunately teach a lot of our young people in one case is to do as we say, not as we do.
Mhm.
And two, to not be able to set boundaries in a respectful manner. And if you do, that's you being disrespectful. So, can
Yeah.
you help us understand, like, how was that for you to figure out how do I use my voice and leverage it in a way that I can share what I need in a compassionate, empathetic way?
I used to think that you would have to set boundaries in like a state of an argument. So I used to only think that like if you were yelling at me and you cursed at me, I would have to come back at you and be like, that is a firm boundary. You cannot curse at me. You cannot call me names. Like, and we are done if you do that. I didn't realize that like you don't have to do that with people, and setting boundaries for yourself, it actually affects the other people more than it does for you.
Mm.
Because it's you basically saying like, I I set my life up this way to protect my peace, and you doing X, Y, and Z does affect me in some ways. And if they can't accept that, that's a direct correlation to them, not you. You are trying to set up your boundary to maintain your peace and to maintain your joy and to maintain your happiness and basically create this little like safe castle of yours because I'm a princess, duh. Um, and so like a big boundary of mine is I don't like when people like overstep. Like I will tell people what I want them to hear, And if they go on this like rabbit hole of searching for things and then come back to me and be like, well, I found out this, I found out that. Well, why don't you just come and ask me? And before I would have probably like had a huge fight and I would have said like, you can't do that. You can't have like that's overstepping. Like, and I would have a whole fight and then probably not speak to them for who knows how long. But now I can go up to people and say, hey, I would have much rathered you come and ask me that instead of going down this rabbit hole of who knows what and finding who knows what, because that's an invasion of my space and my boundaries and how I would like to share my world with you. And you really just have to like, how they react is not it. Like you can control what you can control, and you can't control somebody else's emotions and how they react. So the only thing that you can control is your space.
I love that. It made me think about explosions, right? And I don't really deal in like people who explode. Like it just, to me, it's like, no, I'm cool, right? But there was a time where I was like all in, like, let's go, double down, right? Like I was like, pour gas on it, yeah, burn it down, like, right? And then I was like, wow, that's really toxic. But I did that because, to your point, I didn't know how to just remove, like take the plug out. Like, I'm cool, I'm not, right? But when I found it, I was like, oh, this is like
boundary,
peace.
boundary,
Yeah,
boundary,
like,
boundary.
Right? And it feels good because you feel, you realize that like, I'm actually responsible for my emotions. I'm responsible for how I respond to people. And when in a state of anger or frustration, I don't even react anymore. I just withdraw until I find my peace. Because through my peace and my love, then we can have a conversation, right? So do you find that your reaction to things, when you are elevated, when someone does something that sets you off, like how have you learned to kind of readjust the way that you respond to people so that, yes, I can say X, Y, and Z really deeply affected me and I don't appreciate it, but I can say that in a way, it's particularly to people you care deeply for, that's still rooted in love, right? Without the explosion, potentially. I'm not sure how you used to react, but without the parts of you that you would look back now and say was unhealed.
I think now I sit back in it more and I'm like, so if like a situation transpires, I sit back and I'm like, ooh, I don't really like how that made me feel. Well, why didn't it make me like? Why did it make me feel like that? What about this whole situation? Is it something that's in my past? Is it something that's in my present? Like, is it something that I'm bringing from the past and putting on some person? Like, I really have to like sit back and evaluate everything. And it goes back to like checking in on myself, like because it could be I didn't eat my protein for that day and I'm having like a carb meltdown and I'm just taking random things and exploding to it. But I like. This journey has really taught me that like you have to check in with yourself on the daily. And I think that's why people like tell others to like journal a lot. I'm not a huge journaler. I used to say that I would dabble in it and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a great journaler. And now I don't really like it that much. I'm gonna be so honest. I tried to even like type it up. No, because I thought my hand was hurting because of all the writing. No, it's just not me. So I just have to like being honest. So I just have to sit back and I'm like, if something happens and like one of my coworkers, she is so serious about this. If somebody upsets her peace, she's like, I'm gonna need you to go in the corner and do a little woosah moment, and then you can come back to us. So she has actually taught me like to check in with myself. But even before that, like if something really upsets me, let me take a deep breath. Let me go to the bathroom real quick and let me just like think about what happened that really irritated me. And then moving forward, if I address it in a state of anger, I'm going to get anger back. So I can't come into a situation and have all of that anger and animosity and that explosion, because that's exactly how I'm going to receive it. And if that's not the interaction or the energy that I want in my life, why would I go into those situations with that?
Yeah, it sounds like you spend a lot of time really thinking about like how do I give to the world as a way or a guide of how to show up in the world, right? And I think it requires a level of self-awareness that the reason you're even here is because it's been really interesting watching you live your life and really be more mindful of the steps you're making, right? And so one of the things I think for young people generally that they really struggle with is like, how do I take this thing on? Because it feels so enormous to them, right? It's like, I tell people, like when they say, how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite, right? Like there's this huge Sorry for those who are vegan. I don't really mean eat elephants. Um, but there's this thought process that becomes really overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm curious for you, like I'm sure, like yes, you have made a ton of progress, right, in terms of like journeying towards your best self.
Mhm.
I'm curious for you, what happens, or what's your thoughts when you get overwhelmed? Like, how do you move from the overwhelm to at least a place where you could sit for a minute and kind of check in with what you're doing? Because you're doing a lot.
Yes.
So when you get overwhelmed, what's the process like for other people out there who are trying to do a bunch of stuff? What's a process that you potentially can share that might inform them?
When I get very overwhelmed or very overstimulated is the word that I like to use, I notice that I'm looking at the totality of everything.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at the bigger picture. Like, one thing that really was giving me a lot of anxiety when I left my relationship was I felt like my future was a black hole. I had no idea what I wanted my future to look like because I had pictured it with one person for so long. So then my future was just me and that person. It wasn't a future for just me. So when I left and all I could see was this black hole, I was realizing I was looking at a huge totality. I literally was looking to the end of time. And all I had to think about was, how am I getting through that week? What's the food that I'm eating for that week? And it really helped me like put it into every other aspects of my life, because most of the time when I am getting overwhelmed or I am having that anxiety, it's because I'm looking at the bigger picture. And my mom used to tell me when I was younger, if you can't take it an hour by hour, take it minute by minute, take it second by second.
Mm.
And even at the gym, when you're going through and you're doing all of your reps, they don't ever say like 21, 21, 21. No, they're like, get that one, take a deep breath. You're constantly like chipping at something. So just take it minute by minute, second by second. If I can't get through that hour, go into those minute moments. But I start thinking about like, what is one thing that is going to help me in that end goal, instead of looking at the end goal and how I'm going to get there. It's basically like a step by step like ladder of how I'm going to get there, and then just check off one by one by one instead of looking at that big picture.
I love that. So we're coming up on time, so I have two questions for you.
Yep.
One, your advice, whatever advice you want to share for the younger generation, folks around your age or even younger, trying to make a difference in this world. What's your advice to them?
Oh gosh. I think my generation, we are stuck on timelines, and we have a timeline for everything, a timeline of when we should get married, a timeline of when we should have kids, a timeline of when we should have our career, of when we should have this big money sitting in a bank account. Our lives are not going to be stopped or on hold waiting for you to get all of these things and in this timeline. And I think we just need to push the timeline away, because it's only going to give us anxiety, and it's only like, because you're looking at the totality of everything. But like, what is that going to do for us? We have a life to live. And if we're stuck on these timelines, we're just wasting our potential on the moment that's going to lead us up to that next stop in our life. And our lives we have endless possibilities.
I love that. Yes, I appreciate that. So our last question, taking us out, is what does it mean to be a kind soul?
Oh gosh, I think being a kind soul is just like having empathy and sympathy and compassion for other people, and being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, and realizing that every person that you meet might have the craziest battle going on, and you just have to approach them with like the love and care and acceptance that you would want somebody to approach with you. Yeah, I think that's what it means to be a kind soul.
Jessica Surdyka, you were amazing today. Thank you
you.
so much for joining us at Hello Kind Soul.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to see what this episode, how it helps folks figure out some questions they have. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being courageous. And thank you for helping the world be a better place.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Have an amazing day, folks. We will see you on our next episode. Peace.